please join me in welcoming Oscar Tuazon.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy, and thank you to everyone who's contributed to this exhibition that we'll be visiting in about an hour. It's been an amazing experience for me, and just feel really privileged to be able to do this here. It's been a lot of fun. I'm living in LA, but I'm originally from unceded Suquamish territory, about an hour from Seattle. And so we're going to keep it strictly West Coast tonight, I think. We'll actually start here further north in Mowafaghian, which is it's a little island off of Kodiak Island. And in 2009, I don't know exactly, my brother and a couple friends and I, my brother and I had an exhibition at the Seattle Art Museum. And so in thinking about that exhibition and thinking about the gallery space at the Seattle Art Museum, we wanted to create a situation of longing for another space, or kind of projecting to another space. And so we flew to Mowafaghian with chainsaws and our camping gear for a couple weeks, and cut down a few trees and milled them up with like a little Kodiak mill, and built this very sketchy structure, which we represented in the exhibition space as a kind of postcard size photo, and that was kind of the two venues of the exhibition in a way, and that schema, or that diagram, that relationship between these two spaces is something that I've grappled with throughout my work, including the exhibition here. And, just in thinking about this exhibition and the conversations actually that I had when I first arrived with Kathy and Sabine and Elspeth and Raymond, this idea of like a shack or a cabin for poetry became an interesting question, a space for poetry, and I guess this is one of those spaces. Another structure that had a lot of kind of influence on me was this construction I came across in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains in New Mexico, near I'm forgetting the name of it, but this kind of spiritual center that's built on the hillside, and I'd visited it because it was a zome. We'll get into zomes in a minute, but this building was designed by Steve Bayer, and I was visiting that building. But then, further down the hill, I noticed this kind of ad hoc construction, which was just 4 tree trunks that had all been kind of cut at the same height and connected by a few beams, and that was it. The structure hadn't gotten any further than that, but that to me represented a kind of like architecture on an atomic level, or like the smallest component of architecture, or maybe again the poet's cabin. So in working in and through exhibition spaces, there's the problem of the domestic is always kind of haunting the space of the exhibition. And this space you see here is Kunsthal Bern. This is in Bern, Switzerland, in 2011. And this space, the Kunsthal Bern, was one of the first kind of purpose-built modern exhibition spaces. So it has this not quite white cube, obviously. It was built maybe in 1910 or 1920, something like that. But obviously a space that is built with art in mind. And yet, it still retains all of that kind of domestic DNA. We feel like, we're in an enlarged villa in some ways. And so to deal with that problem, that context, that setting, I wanted to move in and occupy all the rooms of this villa, to pass through the walls, to make a construction that caused structural problems for the building itself. You can see one funny detail is kind of in the back there. The structure does pass through the walls, and those are quite thick brick walls. So we had to jackhammer through these load-bearing walls to pass the beams. And as we were building, this is very spontaneous, kind of improvised construction, maybe based on literally a cocktail napkin sketch, and not much more. And then a materials list of the biggest beams that we could get milled in Switzerland. But there hadn't been, all the problems hadn't been solved until the construction began. And at a certain point, the curator walked in and said, I think we need to check on the floors. We need to check what these floors are made of. We don't actually know. And so they brought in an engineer who drew a little hole in the floor, and they all kind of got very quiet and said, well, these are hollow Italian brick floors, and we've surpassed the load rating. You need to stop. This is kind of the stop, the end point for the structure. But that was also an interesting moment of kind of recognizing the architectonic limits of the structure, and it turns out that we were kind of lucky to be using those load-bearing walls to carry some of the weight of the structure. Thinking about, I guess the formal language of these constructions, it does come from. I guess it takes minimalism as a ready-made. Right, so you can see a kind of minimalist vocabulary there, but then that is actually just kind of a simple math that we can use and create a replicating logic for a structure that may not be able to support itself. And in this case, this is a structure that was built in place beyond my capacity or my understanding of the engineering limits of a structure. You can see this kind of central cast concrete beam was cast in place, and the structure, I don't know if it's really clear in the photo. Yeah, it is. You can see the little chain there. That chain is connected to the chain hoist, this actually enormous industrial scale chain hoist for a shipbuilding, a former shipbuilding warehouse in Tunsberg, Norway. And I wanted to use that lift, that hoist, to support the structure, and then at a certain point let the chain let the structure collapse in on itself, and so it's held in this kind of state of suspended collapse, which for me it was again like a kind of just a really simple diagram of what an artwork is, of like what the existential situation of sculpture is. It can't exist in the wild. It needs an exhibition space. It like literally, physically depends on the conditions of exhibition in order to exist. And this existence, of course, is also it's contingent, but it's completely temporary. That it's something that happens for a moment and then it's gone. And the essential existential status of the space of exhibition is emptiness. It's a void. There's never anything that can fill this space. This is a piece that, you know, as I was talking about on previous work, this kind of let's call it like a drunken logic, a kind of minimalist mind game pushed to the point where it ceases to make sense, or where it becomes illegible. To me, it was important to build things by hand, right? That was also kind of going against minimalist dogma. Because by building things and at the same time conceiving them, you really open up that space for mistakes to happen, for things to go wrong. And that's that's fun about this whole thing. Yeah. So this is a piece, or well, it's a piece of architecture really. That was never meant to be an artwork per se. It was I built this in my apartment in Paris. I was living in Paris at the time, and we had a little side bedroom, a little guest bedroom that I wanted to take over as my studio. And so my way of solving that problem was to move the bed from the guest bedroom into the living room, which is, you can see here, and then in the kind of central platform there, I embedded the bed in this sort of purpose-built zonahedron furniture conversation pit. I still feel bad about the way I butchered that tatami mat, but this was kind of a way of working on life, working on my own life as the material for an experiment in architecture, applying experimental architecture to me and my family. But then the unexpected happened. You know, there was a fire in the building just below us. It just kind of struck me that we're talking about fire here, and the building was evacuated. Our apartment was uninhabitable. There was just terrible smoke damage. we were fine, and actually it was a concrete building, so nothing really burned, but we had to move out. And so this thing that I just kind of built out of not necessity, but you know what I mean. It had to find another home, and so I had an exhibition at that time, and I thought I'll just show that. A kind of an architectural fragment. This is the Parapavilion for the Venice Biennial. And I was invited by the curator, Beecher Kuriger, to kind of think about another kind of pavilion, outside the national pavilions, an artist pavilion, if you would. And so I wanted to create, at the time I was really deeply immersed in the drawings of Louis Kahn, the architect, and he was doing this thing where he was kind of positioning and repositioning obsessively. You know, this is before a computer, so it was all hand-drawn, these amazing little drawings of this project that he'd done for like a convent in Pennsylvania. And he was repositioning these structures really to just create some kind of tension between the buildings, like this courtyard in between the buildings. And I thought that was such an interesting thing to just use the volume of the buildings themselves to create a charged zone. I tried to do that here with this platform that's attached to a tree, a kind of stage set waiting for something to happen. And in fact, it did attract some performers from the great poet, Swedish poet Carl Holmquist, to Patti Smith, and various other poets and performers use that stage as, just as a functional platform for something else to happen. And then in the back, there's this other structure that's formed in collapse. There are these two tabletop structures built, you can see, built one over the other, and with these kind of flexible hinges or articulated hinges at the corner of the structure. And so once we had cast this massive concrete structure in place, at a certain point we tilted them against each other until they collapsed in a state of stasis. And that's another space that you could go inside and kind of like have a respite from this like charged exhibition situation, and maybe just have a moment of reflection, a moment of solitude. One of the real kind of like animating interests in my work is rural spaces. It comes from rural spaces. It comes from non-urban spaces, and there's an intelligence in rural community and in remote spaces of nature, if I can say it like that, that we can learn from. But those spaces are also spaces of exhibition and of culture, and that's something that I think. Did I already say this before? I've been thinking a lot today. This is it's actually a kind of a sculpture park in France, and a sculpture park is it's a perilous space, right? It's kind of like a collection of objects, and I really wanted to do something different than that. So I found a tree You could, this was like maybe when I was really starting to think about trees also, and put a block of marble, Carrara marble, in this tree as a kind of question mark to see what the relationship between those two bodies could be. And speaking of bodies, then the bodies at play. This is my kind of love letter to Brooklyn, I think. Taking these two, Brooklyn street sports, the basketball hoop and the handball wall intersecting here at a tree, and potentially creating a new game, or maybe just chaos and a kind of intersection of different worlds. There were a series of these 3 trees actually here in Brooklyn Bridge Park. This one, I don't have a photo of the second one, and then this one is a fountain. It's a very subtle fountain. You can kind of see the darkened trunk of the tree. There are 2 holes drilled up through that Y that are just trickling very lightly, so that the surface of the tree is wet. It's glistening. It's damp. But this is a very tactile experience. You really need to be up close to it to see it. You need to even touch it. It's a human scale experience. This piece is called People. And another sculpture structure for trees. This one in upstate New York. And I found this space that really spoke to me. This kind of like darkened hillside, and this grove of trees that I wanted to build in between. I wanted to build a structure that was supported by the trees. And you can see the black locust kind of in the foreground. That one was planted in concrete. I mean, we cut down that black locust and imported it there and built the rest of the structure around it. And then there's a sugar maple on the other side that is existing there. And so this structure, again, was kind of like posing a problem between trees and concrete that now, I don't know, 10, 15 years later, it is, yes, it is a problem. This is a Scott Burton, a blatant Scott Burton ripoff. My cover version of a great Scott Burton granite chair. And that ambiguity between sculpture and furniture that kind of pivots around a bodily experience of an object or a space. Sculpture that you experience with your ass rather than with your mind. This has been really kind of just a puzzle, a fascinating conundrum that I return to a lot. It's this you can kind of see the revolving door through the revolving door. This is like a kind of architectural replica or repetition that I did at the Museum Ludwig in Cologne. I took this existing revolving door, this element of the architecture, and just recreated it as a freestanding object, this kind of circles and circles, a revolving door to nowhere. This is a window, or a painting device. You can see through the window faintly. There's a 55-gallon drum that was filled with a mixture of polystyrene beads and wet plaster that was like pumped with a little pump, hand pump, into the space between the two panes of glass until it began to fill the structure and, of course, eventually hardened in this kind of state of, it's like an action painting, a mechanism for creating an action painting. This is a Quonset hut, which, of course, is a kind of a whole genus of utilitarian architecture. It was a kind of military technology first deployed in World War II, I think. This kind of like architecture by helicopter idea that a building could be rapidly fabricated or just dropped in place. And I wanted to make, a single serve Quonset hut, a one-person tent, a minimal structure, and you can see it's got this kind of rib structure that could support a tent, and then there's a table there in the back, and yet it's also completely unfinished. I mean, let's be honest. It's not really a structure at all. It's more like a drawing or a model for something. And again, this kind of like structure that is in a not parasitic role, but a kind of a dependent, contingent relationship with the space of exhibition, that it doesn't need a roof because it's already got a roof. All the problems have been solved. So that opens this space of a kind of different it's a space of imagination that it's a structure that you can complete in your mind. It's the poet's hut. This actually is like a real poet's hut. This was made, in a sense, dedicated to my friend, the poet Cedar Saigo. I made this structure for Stephen Hall. Stephen Hall, he's an architect, but he also has an exhibition space. And he's an architect who I think in a lot of ways, again, keeping it West Coast, he's from Bremerton, which is, a short ferry ride from Seattle. And I would say he fancies himself kind of a poet in a way. And and a lot of the structures that he's made, they come from this practice of watercolor painting. These really quirky little watercolors generate these massive steel and concrete buildings. But I found that genesis really interesting, and on his property here. Oh my God, I'm going. Okay, sorry, I'm taking too many tangents. I'm going to speed it up, I promise. But I just want to point out that on his property here, he's got his house and a kind of exhibition space that goes around, an exhibition program. But then down by the lake, there's a short walk to the lake, and he's got this little 10 by 10 wooden hut. It's called the watercolor hut. And the detail, the punctum that he describes about this structure is that in wintertime, it's upstate New York, so it does get quite cold, but he can go in there in the morning and it has no heat, no infrastructure, but he'll go in and the watercolor trays will be frozen over because it's so cold in there, and he just sits in there long enough for the ice to melt in the watercolor trays, and then he can make his little poetry. A memorial to the Commandos d'Afrique, which is located in Belfort, France, and this is an important site. It's right on the border of France and Switzerland, and it was where the Commandos d'Afrique liberated the town of Belfort in November of 1945. They had left Algeria. They were kind of a conscripted force that left Algeria, fought across Italy and France. And this chapter of the Second World War is really poorly remembered or not at all memorialized in France at all. And the program created by the curator Xavier Dureau, called Nouveaux Commanditaires, is really this quite special initiative that allows communities to directly commission artists to create an artwork with a curator as an intermediary. And this structure allowed the Algerian community based in Belfort to commission me to work on this project. And my response is this kind of wooden bridge, this stockade bridge that's oriented in two axes, one towards the Lion of Belfort, which is this kind of enormous war memorial created by Lombardi, the sculptor behind the Statue of Liberty, which is the icon of Belfort, and the other axis is back towards Algiers, where the commandos began their journey. And why make a war memorial or a permanent public artwork in wood? Well, I thought that was a way to ensure that maintenance and care was an integral component of the project. If it's cared for, it can exist perpetually. It could exist for thousands of years, as many wood structures have done and continue to exist through care. But nothing is forever, and that relationship between the sculpture and the community has become more and more important to the work that I do. This is a project for Sculpture Münster, and this is a Münster. For those of you who know it, it's an exhibition that happens every 10 years, and it's also the story of a curator, Caspar Koenig, who used sculpture to transform a city. Münster, after the war, was completely bombed out, and starting in 77 or 67, I can't remember, probably 77, Sculpture Münster became an international exhibition of sculpture. And the town of Munster hated it. They couldn't even wrap their mind around why, what this thing was. But through each successive iteration, it has become kind of the center of this city. Many of the projects remain, and it's now a city that's in love with sculpture. All of this prelude just to say that, I was looking again for a place outside of town, outside of this slightly Disneyfied version of a German village, completely recreated after the war, of course. And so I found this spot on the canal. And Casper took me to various places. I walked this site, and the thing I noticed was all these little fire rings, along the canal, where people go and grill a sausage. And of course, this is a German pastime to go and grill yourself a sausage and take a swim. But to my American mind, I just couldn't, I couldn't get over it. That was so cool that you could start a fire in public. Again, it's maybe not the time to make that joke coming from Los Angeles this week, but okay. That was what I was thinking of at the moment. And so I wanted to kind of take that informal gesture, that individual, civic-minded pyromania, and memorialize it and turn it into a civic function. So I built this structure. It's a rocket stove, which is a very clean-burning, efficient, wood-burning stove, kind of a hippie technology that is really effective. And the reason it's this massive concrete construction is that it heats up that central column, and then it becomes a warm social space. And I can tell you it's well beloved. It was, again, I specifically chose this site on the edge of town because I knew that people would find it and they would use it. And indeed, the day that the sculpture exhibition opened, I remember opening the gates around it, and a guy just rolls up with a little speaker, not a little speaker, a big speaker on a little cart, and the rave music started, and the piece just became completely appropriated by its public. And this is just like last year. It's still there. It's hanging on. Had a little rough patch during the pandemic when it became kind of a COVID hotspot, but the fires are still burning there in Munster. This is an architectural model, again. It's a half-scale model of a house, cabin in the woods, that I've been building with my family, not far from here, in fact, on the Hoh River, which is just, as the crow flies, just a little southwest of here, on the Olympic Peninsula. I wanted to kind of use that stud framing, that the language of stud framing, to create to take this domestic space that obviously is very important to me and that is very meaningful to me, and bring it into a public space and just kind of blow the walls off and use it as a functional gathering space within the space of an exhibition. So you can see it's got benches there. People used this space during the run of the exhibition. There were class meetings. The students from the ETH had class meetings there, and the rocket stove in this case is not functional, but it's again a model. And now we'll take a little trip back in time to 1967 with the first hippie commune in America, in Trinidad, Colorado. This is a structure designed by architect Steve AVAIR. This is a kind of post-geodesic moment. This is like taking the geodesic technology of Buckminster Fuller and kind of running it through just a crazy hippie recycling, kind of DIY process of building. The structure is built from car tops. They cut up old cars and use the sheet metal to create these structures that were never really habitable. It became Drop City. It became a city for a very short time, but the buildings were more like models. They were not really fully functional, but had this kind of utopian aspect to them. Although AVAIR did learn from that and went on to build himself a home. Stephen Holly AVAIR built this Zome house in 1968 to 72 in Corrales, New Mexico, not so far away from Trinidad. And you can see the feature here is the south-facing facade. It's these stacks of 55-gallon drums that are full of water. It heats during the day, and then in that high desert climate, the temperature plunges at night, and all the solar energy stored in those 55-gallon drums radiates throughout the house and keeps the house really amazingly climatized year-round. In the summer months when it gets too hot, those facade panels can be lifted to close the structure off from solar gain. The thing that always kind of I found kind of absurd is that there are these enormous picture windows facing the Sangre de Cristi Mountains, this incredible view, and you can't see anything. Like, you can't see out of the house at all. There's these tiny little windows, right? So there are all these idiosyncratic, eccentric aspects of this structure. But it's still there. And I guess it was probably, it's more than 10 years ago now. I'd been in touch with AVAIR over the years, honestly. I'd been hounding him since I was practically in my early 20s, probably. And finally, he allowed me to come visit him. I'd been to he's kind of an inventor, and he allowed me to come to his shop at one point, and then somehow I got together some money, and I was able to kind of bribe my way into his house. He invited me into his house, and I actually got to go there and experience that passive solar technology fully functional. It's a really cozy house, and you can see the transformation from the kind of space age structure in the 60s to the adobe walled structure of today. It's learned a lot, or you could say appropriated a lot, from the indigenous Southwest architecture, which has always been passive solar. It's always used water as a climatizing element. There are these roof ponds in Southwest architecture that perform the same function as this kind of high-tech space age building. So I got it in my mind that I wanted to create a model a full-scale model of this structure. And so I went to his house and made a full-scale 3D model of the structure and recreated it with this thick plywood shell, this kind of structural shell. This is for an art exhibition, an art fair format. So it was temporary. It was always meant to be temporary. But I built the structure with panels that could be disassembled and packed flat, and that I had in my mind that this was a mobile building, a building in search of a site, and I didn't know really where it was going to end up, but I wanted to use this opportunity to kind of initiate this project of modular mobile architecture. Literally, when I came back from constructing that, I went to Standing Rock. And Standing Rock was this moment where it was, first of all, it was a pedagogical moment. It was this amazing kind of pedagogical moment around water and oil, and the importance of protecting the Cannonball River, the point where the Enbridge fracked gas pipeline would cross under the Cannonball River, is this very rural space. It's like, I mean, not in this photo. This was maybe the second time I went there, when Standing Rock had become an instant city of 10,000 people. But if you go there today, it's empty. There's not any houses, nothing around there. It's the land of Ladonna Brave Bull Allard, who started the camp with a small group of Indigenous women to protect this one very hyper-local river crossing that would have this like kind of enormous impact on the waterways downstream that connects to the Mississippi River and the Missouri River, and 18 million people live in the watershed of this Dakota River, Cannonball River crossing. And so that, like, teaching was really, it was encapsulated in Miniwachoni, the slogan, water is life. But it was kind of very alive in the camp, as was the practice of mobile architecture. You can see, just in this photo, everything from camping tents to teepees, army tents, car camping. It was this kind of city. I mean, it was a just an incredible experience to be surrounded by other people practicing architecture in a completely DIY, completely passionate way. And as an artist, it's pretty rare to have those experiences where you feel like you're in a space of people who you have affinity with. It can be kind of isolating, but this was an experience of coming home. So then, of course, I became kind of obsessed with pipelines, and this is another exhibition or a project from around that time, using the infrastructure of water pipelines. This is actually what water pipelines look like. They're underground for the most part. We don't see them. This is a kind of massive flood control technology, but I wanted to bring it to the surface as a structure that you could walk through. This is in Paris. And to bring it, to make it tangible, something that you could touch. Back in LA, I had a studio in downtown LA, adjacent to the LA River, and so I brought the elements of the Zome structure. You can see these containers. I shipped everything by container, and next to my studio space there was this outdoor lot, and I started building there. First we built the stage, and in this kind of like moment of this post-Standing Rock moment, before there was even a structure there were musical performances, and we kind of started to envision this space as like just a kind of community space for learning about the LA River. And we had music, and then people would discover this space because it was on the street level, and there was just a big sliding gate. There was no frame, there was no institutional frame, there was no gallery, there was no museum. People discovered it on their own, and it became a spontaneous space. It's unlike any other kind of exhibition situation that I've experienced, because there wasn't any frame around it, and it never really was finished. It was this kind of building in process, some various different iterations in its construction. We held conferences and conversations and learned about the history of the LA River, and exhibitions. And of course, our water connects to water everywhere. So this is Tara Hauska from GNU Collective talking about another Enbridge pipeline in northern Minnesota. Jessica Calderon talking about Yongna, the original village site of Los Angeles. And the building continued to move. It continued to kind of follow water to other locations. This is another piece of that same structure. I started to divide it into smaller pieces, to disassemble this domestic space and turn it into an exploded kind of public space with a library drawn from the University of Michigan, where this was held. Michigan State University. And the structure, again, kind of functioning as a platform for other activities, for classroom activities, for meetings, as a way to envision another kind of architecture and to host conversations around water. So this was like the genesis of Water School, the project that I've been working on now since 2016, 2018. It here is in the Great Lakes region, at the Chicago Architectural Biennial, and engaging with local water questions in that context. And as a modular structure, it could move from place to place. Not quite sure why that's there, but another pipeline transition connecting one landscape to another. This is Spring Valley. Around this time, while Water School was kind of coming into being and collecting all these other conversations and voices around water, I started reading about Spring Valley, which is in northeastern Nevada, just right next to the Utah line and the state line. And Spring Valley is an area that doesn't get a lot of rainfall, but has this enormous aquifer. You can kind of see even in the picture how green it is. This is this amazingly lush area, high mountains. Well, the valley here is about 5,000 feet, 5,500 feet elevation. And the snow-capped mountains on either side drain into that aquifer, and so it's this enormous resource of fresh water that the city of Las Vegas, which is 350 miles to the south, has been coveting for over 30 years now, trying to build a $15 billion water pipeline 350 miles up into the mountains to mine the groundwater here, to really just extract billions of gallons of fresh water for the city of Las Vegas. It's a city. It's a story that's really reminiscent of the formation of the city of Los Angeles, which was created essentially 100 years ago with the Mulholland Pipeline, which in its own way is an environmental catastrophe. So I heard about this through a local paper, and in the article, Chairman Rupert Steele of the Goshute tribe was quoted as saying, this pipeline can't be built because the Spring Valley is sacred to the Goshute Shoshone people. There's a tree that grows only in this valley, the swamp cedar, as it's known, the Basa Wabi. And the pipeline would irrevocably destroy this ecosystem and these trees, which some 100,000s of years ago separated off from the other Rocky Mountain junipers in this area that grow throughout the American Southwest, and created its own genetically unique tree that grows only in this valley. There's only a small population of trees that grows in the valley bottom, and they've adapted to this brackish, high alkaline water is at the valley bottom. The site also happens to be the site of a series of 3 massacres of the Goshute and Shoshone people in the 1860s, 1870s, and in 1894. And so the area is considered sacred to the Goshute Shoshone people, and literally the trees are the genetic relatives of the people who live there today. Delane Spilsbury, who was in the photo I showed just a second ago, is the granddaughter of one of 2 survivors of the 1894 massacre. And so these 2 figures, Delane and Rupert, led this kind of improbable effort to preserve this area against the hotels and tourist industry and the whole political class of Las Vegas. And it seemed just a completely lost cause. The power imbalance is so stark. But picked up the phone and I called Rupert and I explained to him that I was an artist and I had this project that I was working on, this architecture, this building, and he was just immediately so open and welcoming. He invited me up, and together we looked for an appropriate site for this kind of structure, for this water school in the area around Spring Valley. And so we found here, you can see, zooming in, just to give you a sense of the terrain out there, it's a really uninhabited, again, quite rural space. But there's water there. There's a spring and a reservoir and this little 40-acre plot that we found, we bought in 2018. And from that point, we began to develop the ideas for a water school in this site that could tell the stories of the massacres, the story of this incredible genetically unique tree, and the contemporary story of this totally inspiring and improbable conservation victory. Because in 2020, 2021, this whole conflict came before a federal judge, and the area was protected. The pipeline project was definitively blocked. It's kind of amazing. I still just find it incredibly inspiring that this small group of ranchers and some Mormon folks and then, of course, led by the tribes, were able to stand up against this massive coalition of business owners and kind of powerful interests in Las Vegas, and preserved this area for perpetuity. Pretty cool. So that here again is Cedar Spring, and you can see there's nothing built on the site yet. I almost don't need to build anything there, honestly. It's almost perfect as it is. So I'm being very, we're being very cautious and very slow, and we've created a nonprofit organization, a board that is developing the plans, and we're continuing to model this structure here in cardboard, and thinking about, again, this relationship between the space of exhibition, or the spaces of art, and this rural site. And really also imagining, like, what is it that an artwork can do in this valley that's about a 2.5-hour drive from the nearest town of like 3,000 people. The Goshoot Reservation is our closest neighbor, but there's like 100 people on the Goshoot Reservation. And so that's the primary audience of this work, is that small group of people who are deeply invested in this place. The secondary audience might be the larger conservation community that's been involved in this effort to preserve Basawabi. And the third audience could be the kind of existing land art tourist industry, could we call it that, that connects Nancy Holt's Sun Tunnels and Robert Smithson's Spiral Jetty in the north, and Michael Heiser's City in the south. I'm like smack dab in the middle there. This is kind of another context that forms this work. But in my case, am I going too long? Okay, I'm wrapping it up. Thank you. it's only like 4 more slides. Thanks for your patience. So there we have it. No, that's okay. It's good. I don't really have. I have a whole nother section that I will not get to tonight, but I'll just finish with a couple slides of Cedar Spring, and then maybe we'll open it up to questions from there. So yeah, thank you.